Welcome back to The Global Anchor, the podcast dedicated to unpacking the high-stakes decisions that shape our world economy. I'm your host, Alex Chen, and today we're diving into a story that starts with one of the most stable currencies in the world, the US dollar, and ends with the most volatile, Bitcoin. It's the unique monetary journey of El Salvador. With me today is Dr. Sofia Reyes. Dr. Reyes is a geopolitical economy analyst and a specialist in emerging market financial systems. Sofia, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Alex. It's great to be here. This is one of the most fascinating case studies in modern finance.
It really is. I want to start by framing the scale of this decision. In 2001, almost overnight, El Salvador officially replaced the Colón with the US dollar. Imagine your national currency, a symbol of sovereignty, just gone. It's not a common occurrence.
That's a powerful way to put it, Alex. It wasn't the typical story of a hyperinflationary collapse like we saw in Zimbabwe or even Ecuador before them. El Salvador's inflation in the late 90s was manageable, around 3.4%. So the decision wasn't a desperate reaction to chaos. It was a proactive, strategic choice. And that distinction is crucial.
So if it wasn't runaway inflation, what was the primary driver? What were they trying to anchor themselves to?
I see three main pillars. First, credibility and fiscal discipline. After the Civil War and a period of instability, the government needed to signal absolute commitment to the global market. By adopting the dollar, they essentially tied their hands, giving up the ability to print money, what economists call seigniorage, to finance deficits. It was a self-imposed discipline.
Right. They were saying, we can't be trusted with the money printer, so we'll just turn it off.
Exactly. The second pillar was lower interest rates. The theory was that using the dollar would reduce the country's perceived risk. Therefore, banks could access cheaper international capital. And those savings should translate into lower mortgage rates and investment loans for the average Salvadoran.
Did that happen in practice?
Partially, but the most immediate and tangible factor, the third pillar, was remittances.
The lifeblood of the economy.
Precisely. Remittances from the massive Salvadoran diaspora in the U.S. already represented a vital, growing portion of their GDP. Dollarization simplified these transfers immensely and, crucially, eliminated exchange rate risk for the families receiving the money. The dollar that left Houston was the dollar that arrived in San Salvador. It was an immediate, powerful benefit for millions of people.
Let's focus on the benefits first. For 2 decades, what did dollarization deliver?
The number one win, hands down, was stability as a beacon. The dollar tamed the inflation beast. By importing the U.S.'s low and stable inflation, the purchasing power of fixed salaries was protected. People could save without the fear that their money would evaporate. This is a massive psychological and economic benefit for the working class.
That sense of certainty is invaluable. When the currency is stable, you can plan. You can look 5 years down the road.
Absolutely. The other major benefit, as we touched on, was the remittance anchor. Before 2001, a fluctuation in the Colón could wipe out a percentage of what a relative sent. Dollarization made that flow 100% efficient from a currency risk perspective. The IMF even noted that this provided remarkable stability, especially during global financial crises.
It sounds like a perfect solution, right? Stability, low inflation, easy money transfers. But the title of the document we're discussing calls the dollar the broken anchor and talks about the cost. Where did the system break down?
The cost was the loss of monetary sovereignty. Think of it as surrendering the steering wheel of your economy to another country. The Central Reserve Bank became a glorified currency management office. They couldn't print money. They couldn't adjust local interest rates.
So when the U.S. Federal Reserve raised rates in Washington, D.C., what happened in El Salvador?
Instantaneous transmission. Those interest rate hikes, made to cool the U.S. economy, immediately increased the cost of credit and slowed investment in El Salvador, regardless of what the Salvadoran economy actually needed. They were running an economy designed in another country. This led to what we call the rigidity effect.
The rigidity effect. Can you explain that simply?
If the Salvadoran economy hit a slump, the government had no monetary lifeline. They couldn't devalue to make exports cheaper, and they couldn't lower rates to stimulate borrowing. Their only tools were fiscal policy, taxes and spending, which are slow and often politically difficult. It's like sailing a ship with an incredibly stable anchor, but no engine to move it when the weather is good.
That analogy hits home, and the data bears this out. Average GDP growth fell from 4% pre-dollarization to about 2.5% during the dollarized period. Stability was purchased at the cost of dynamism.
Exactly. And beyond the macro numbers, there was a profound psychological cost, especially for two key groups. First, the general population felt the upward rounding of prices, a subtle negative effect when converting from 8.75 Colón to $1. Merchants often rounded up to the nearest dollar amount, making day-to-day goods feel suddenly more expensive.
That conversion friction caused confusion and resentment on the streets, didn't it?
It did. But the second and far more significant emotional cost relates to financial exclusion. Despite having the world's reserve currency, a huge portion of the rural population, over 70%, remained unbanked.
How can you have the most secure currency in the world, yet still have most of your population outside the formal financial system?
Because the formal system, the banks, was rigid, conservative, and oligopolistic. Dollarization attracted large, solid international banks, which is good for stability, but they operated under strict, high-cost regulations. They had no incentive to set up branches in remote villages or serve low-income individuals.
So the dollar created a financially secure system, but only for those who were in the system. For the unbanked majority, it was just a stable physical currency, not a tool for growth or savings.
That's it. It became a two-tiered system. And this brings us to Bitcoin. The subsequent adoption of Bitcoin in 2021 wasn't a rejection of stability. The dollar is still legal tender. It was an attempt to fix the void that the dollarization left behind.
Let's break that down. How did Bitcoin promise to solve the rigidity and exclusion problems of the dollar?
It targeted the two biggest systemic flaws. First, financial exclusion was addressed with the Chivo digital wallet, promising instant mobile banking access for anyone with a phone. It was an immediate leapfrog over the conservative banking infrastructure.
Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, the high cost of remittances. Even with dollarization, traditional intermediaries were charging 5 to 10% on transfers. That's a silent multi-million-dollar tax on the poorest families every year. Bitcoin promised zero-fee, instant transfers. It's a direct response to the dollar system's transactional inefficiency. It's fascinating how one monetary system created the very conditions, the stability and the rigidity that necessitated the creation of the next one. The dollar was the anchor, but it was also the chain. Let's pivot to the actionable takeaways for our listeners, whether they're managing a personal portfolio or running an international business. What does El Salvador's Odyssey teach us about our own financial decisions?
The biggest lesson is that stability should never be synonymous with stagnation. El Salvador gained price stability, which is great, but lost its ability to drive productive structural growth. For an individual, this means don't anchor your entire financial life to a single asset or a single currency just because it feels safe.
That makes sense. Diversification is key, even with instability.
Right. And for investors, look at the FDI data. In El Salvador, the dollar wasn't a sufficient magnet for foreign investment. It underscores that no currency, no matter how strong, can guarantee prosperity if a nation doesn't solve its structural problems, like education, legal security, and productivity.
So the stability of the currency is necessary but not sufficient.
Precisely. The other takeaway is to constantly evaluate the hidden costs of your anchors. If you rely on traditional banking for international transfers, that 5 to 10% fee is a hidden cost. If your savings are earning zero interest, that low or negative real return is a hidden cost. El Salvador's move to Bitcoin was essentially a cost reduction strategy aimed at these transaction fees and the cost of financial exclusion.
That's a powerful final thought, constantly questioning